The rain was falling softly that evening when my son told me to pack my things. I remember the exact moment. I was sitting in the living room of the house I had lived in for 42 years, holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold. My hands were shaking slightly, not because of age, but because something in Daniel's voice felt different, cold. Before we begin today's story, take a quiet moment and show some love by liking and subscribing to this channel. Your love and support mean everything to me. I'd love to know how these stories make you feel, so share your thoughts in the comments, and do let me know where you're watching from. Now, let's begin our story. "Mom," he said, standing near the doorway with his arms crossed, "we need to talk." When a child says those words to their parent, you already know something isn't right. I looked at him carefully. Daniel was 40 now, a tall man, well-dressed, confident, the kind of man people respected, the kind of man I had spent my entire life raising. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked gently. He didn't sit down. Instead, he sighed like he was carrying the weight of the world. "Mom, this isn't easy to say." Something inside my chest tightened. Behind him, his wife Rebecca stood silently, leaning against the wall with her arms folded. She didn't say a word, but her eyes avoided mine. That told me everything. Daniel rubbed his forehead. "You can't live here anymore." For a moment, I thought I heard him wrong. "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. He finally looked me in the eyes. "You're getting older. You need more care. Rebecca and I both work full-time. We have the kids to take care of. The house is small. It's just too much." My heart sank slowly. "I cook for the kids every day," I said softly. "I clean the house. I even pick them up from school when you're busy." Daniel sighed again, impatient this time. "That's not the point, Mom." Rebecca finally spoke, her voice sharp but calm. "You're 76. You fell last month in the kitchen. What if something worse happens? We can't be responsible for that." Responsible. The word hurt more than anything. I looked around the living room slowly. The old bookshelf, the sofa Daniel used to jump on when he was 5, the wall where his childhood drawings were once taped. This wasn't just a house. This was my entire life. "So, what are you saying?" I whispered. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. "He found a very nice nursing home," he said quickly. "It's clean, professional staff. You'll have people your age to talk to." He placed the brochure on the table. The smiling elderly people on the front page looked nothing like the fear I felt inside. "You already arranged this?" I asked. Daniel nodded. "You'll move tomorrow morning." Tomorrow. Not next week. Not next month. Tomorrow. My throat tightened. "Daniel," I said quietly, "this is my home." Rebecca's voice cut through the room. "It's Daniel's house now. The deed was transferred 5 years ago, remember?" Of course I remembered. Back then, Daniel had told me it would make taxes easier. I believed him. I always believed my son. I looked at him again. The little boy who used to run into my arms after school. The boy who once cried all night when he had a fever and begged me not to leave his side. And now? Now I was a burden. "You don't want me here anymore," I said quietly. Daniel looked uncomfortable. "It's not like that." But we both knew it was exactly like that. The next morning, a small white van arrived. Daniel barely spoke during the drive. Rebecca stayed home. When we reached the nursing home, a young nurse helped me out of the car. Daniel handed my small suitcase to the receptionist. That's all her belongings. 42 years of life reduced to one suitcase. Before leaving, he gave me a quick hug, the kind of hug people give strangers. "Take care, Mom," he said. Then he walked out. Just like that. I watched through the glass doors as his car drove away. I thought the pain would break me, but strangely, it didn't. Because as I sat in that quiet nursing home that night, staring at the single suitcase beside the bed, I realized something Daniel didn't know. something no one in that house knew, and exactly 1 week later, my son would discover a truth that would change his life forever. But by then, it would already be too late. The first night in the nursing home was the longest night of my life. Not because the room was uncomfortable, not because the bed was hard, but because of the silence. A strange, heavy silence that only exists in places where people feel forgotten. The room they gave me was small but clean, a narrow bed near the wall, a wooden cabinet, and a single window overlooking a parking lot. The light outside flickered every few minutes. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at my suitcase. 42 years of life in one small bag. Clothes, 2 framed photographs, my old reading glasses, and a small leather notebook. That notebook meant more than anything else I owned. But no one knew that. Not even Daniel. A soft knock came at the door. A young nurse walked in with a warm smile. "Hello, Mrs. Whitmore. My name is Anna. I'll be helping you tonight." Her kindness almost made me cry. "Thank you," I said quietly. She placed a glass of water on the bedside table. "If you need anything, press this button." She paused, looking at me carefully. "You must be tired." I forced a small smile. "Yes, it's been a long day." After she left, the room became silent again. I slowly opened the suitcase and took out the 2 photographs. The first one was of Daniel when he was 8 years old. He was standing in front of his school science project, smiling proudly with a missing front tooth. The second photo was from his graduation day. He looked so confident wearing his suit. I remembered how proud I was that day. I had worked 3 jobs to pay for his education: morning cleaning offices, afternoon shifts at a grocery store, night shifts sewing clothes at a small factory. I did it gladly, because every mother believes one thing, that one day her child will remember. But life doesn't always work that way. I placed the photographs back in the suitcase and leaned back against the pillow. The clock on the wall ticked slowly. 1:12 a.m. I closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. Instead, memories flooded my mind. Daniel running through the yard as a child. Daniel crying after his first heartbreak in college. Daniel hugging me after he got his first job. And then, Daniel standing in the living room yesterday, telling me I was a burden. A quiet tear rolled down my cheek, but I wiped it away quickly, because deep down, I knew something Daniel didn't. Something that would soon change everything. The next few days passed slowly. The nursing home routine was always the same. Breakfast at 7, medication at 9, lunch at noon, dinner at 6, lights out by 10. Most of the residents spent their days watching television or staring out the windows. Many had no visitors. Some hadn't seen their families in years. I spoke to a few of them. There was Mr. Harris, an old man who used to be a school principal, Mrs. Delgado, who loved knitting scarves for the nurses, and Mrs. Green, who repeated the same story about her childhood farm every single day. They were kind people, but you could see it in their eyes. They had been left behind. On the 4th day, Nurse Anna sat beside me during lunch. "You're different from the other residents," she said. I looked up from my soup. "How so?" "You don't seem sad." I smiled gently. "Oh, I was sad the first night." "But not anymore?" she asked. I shook my head slowly. "No." Anna looked curious. "Why?" I hesitated for a moment. Then I reached into my pocket and tapped the small leather notebook. "Because sometimes," I said softly, "life has a strange way of revealing the truth." She didn't understand what I meant, but soon, Daniel would. Exactly 1 week after Daniel left me here, something unexpected happened. It was Wednesday morning. The sun was shining through the dining room windows while residents ate their breakfast. I was quietly drinking tea when the front door suddenly opened. A tall man in a dark suit walked inside. Behind him were 2 other people carrying briefcases. The receptionist stood up immediately. "Good morning. Can I help you?" The man showed the badge. "I'm looking for Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore." Every person in the dining room turned to look at me. I raised my hand calmly. "That's me." The man walked toward my table and smiled politely. "Mrs. Whitmore, my name is Richard Lawson. I'm the senior legal advisor from Lawson and Grant Associates." The name meant nothing to anyone else in the room, but it meant everything to me. I nodded slowly. "I was expecting you." He placed a thick folder on the table. "Mrs. Whitmore, according to the documents you signed 15 years ago, today is the scheduled date for the full disclosure of your estate." The entire room went quiet. Mr. Harris stopped chewing. Mrs. Delgado froze with her knitting needles. Even the nurses stared. Richard Lawson continued speaking. "Mrs. Whitmore, as of today, your ownership of Whitmore Holdings and its associated assets will be publicly transferred to your designated beneficiary, unless you decide otherwise." Anna blinked in confusion. "Ownership of what?" I took a slow sip of tea. "Whitmore Holdings?" Mr. Lawson nodded respectfully. "For clarity," he said, "Whitmore Holdings currently manages real estate investments, medical research partnerships, and technology patents across 6 countries." He paused before adding the final sentence. "The total estimated value of the company is approximately $420 million. A spoon dropped somewhere in the room. Anna stared at me in shock. "You own a company worth $400 million? I smiled gently. "Technically, yes." "What?" she whispered. Mr. Lawson continued. "Mrs. Whitmore kept her ownership completely private for personal reasons." I leaned back in my chair. 15 years ago, after Daniel graduated, I had invested my savings into a small property partnership with an old friend. That small investment grew, and grew, and grew. Over time, it became Whitmore Holdings. I never told Daniel. I didn't want money to change him. Ironically, it did anyway, without even knowing it existed. Anna's voice trembled. "Does your son know about this?" I shook my head slowly. "No." Mr. Lawson looked at me. "Mrs. Whitmore, we also received the other instruction you filed last week." I nodded. "Yes, go ahead." He pulled out another document. 3 days ago, your son Daniel Whitmore signed paperwork to finalize ownership of the house you lived in." I nodded again. "That's correct. However," Mr. Lawson continued calmly, "the property was purchased under a mortgage held by Whitmore Holdings 15 years ago." The room became silent again. "Which means," he said carefully, "the house legally belongs to you." Anna covered her mouth. "Oh my God." "And since Daniel recently violated the occupancy agreement," Mr. Lawson added calmly, "the company has the legal right to reclaim the property immediately." I looked out the window for a moment. The sky was bright blue. "Has the notice been delivered?" I asked. "Yes," Mr. Lawson said. "This morning." Across town, at exactly that same moment, Daniel was drinking coffee in the kitchen. Rebecca walked in holding a letter. "Daniel, there's something strange here." He looked up. "What is it?" She handed him the envelope. The logo at the top read, "Whitmore Holdings Legal Department." Daniel frowned. "What's this?" He opened the letter and started reading. At first, his face looked confused, then pale, then terrified. Rebecca grabbed the paper. "What does it say?" Daniel's hands were shaking. "It says we have 48 hours to vacate the property." Rebecca laughed nervously. "That's impossible. This house is yours." Daniel swallowed hard. "No, it isn't." Rebecca stared at him. "What do you mean?" His voice cracked. "It says the house belongs to Whitmore Holdings, and apparently," he looked back at the letter again, "the owner of Whitmore Holdings is my mother." Back at the nursing home, Nurse Anna was still staring at me. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you going to take the house back?" I looked down at my tea for a moment. Then I said quietly, "No." Everyone looked surprised. "Then what are you going to do?" Anna asked.
I smiled softly. I'm going to do something much more important. Mr. Lawson closed the folder. And what is that? I looked around the dining room, at the forgotten faces, at the quiet loneliness in their eyes. Then I said the words that would change everything. I'm going to buy this nursing home. The room exploded with whispers. Anna gasped. You're serious? I nodded yes. And after that, we're going to turn it into the most beautiful retirement home in the country. Mr. Harris wiped his eyes. Mrs. Delgado smiled. Even the nurses looked emotional. But at that exact moment, the front door of the nursing home suddenly burst open, and a familiar voice shouted across the room, "Mom!" Daniel, standing there, pale, shaking, holding the legal letter in his hand. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time in his life. "Mom, please, we need to talk." The entire room went silent again. I slowly stood up from my chair and looked.
Mom, please, we need to talk. Daniel's voice echoed across the dining hall. Every person in the room turned to look at him. The nurses froze. The residents stopped eating. Even the receptionist stepped closer to watch. Daniel stood at the entrance of the nursing home, breathing heavily as if he had run all the way there. His hair was messy, his tie was loose, and in his trembling hand, he was still holding the legal letter. For the first time in years, my son looked small, lost, afraid. I stood quietly beside the dining table, watching him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he slowly walked toward me. Each step seemed heavier than the last. When he finally reached my table, he looked down at the floor. "Mom?" he said softly. I waited. He swallowed hard before speaking again. "I didn't know." His voice cracked. "I swear, I didn't know." Behind me, Nurse Anna gently placed a hand on my shoulder, but I gave her a small, reassuring smile. I was calm. Strangely calm. Daniel finally lifted his eyes to meet mine. They were filled with panic. "Mom, please tell me this is some kind of mistake." I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I asked a simple question. "Did you read the letter carefully?" He nodded quickly. "Yes, it says the house belongs to Whitmore Holdings, and it says the owner is you." Rebecca suddenly appeared behind him, rushing into the room. Her face was pale. She had clearly been crying. "Mrs. Whitmore?" she said quickly, forcing a weak smile. "There must be some misunderstanding." The entire room became tense. Rebecca continued speaking, her voice shaky but desperate. "Daniel thought the house was transferred to him years ago." I looked at her quietly. "He thought wrong." Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" His voice was almost pleading. "You let me believe the house was mine." I tilted my head slightly. "Did you ever ask?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out, because he knew the truth. He had never asked. For years, Daniel had simply assumed everything belonged to him. He had never questioned it, never thought about it, and certainly never asked the woman who built it all. I turned slowly and looked around the dining hall. Every resident was watching us. Mr. Harris had taken off his glasses. Mrs. Delgado held her knitting tightly in her lap. Even the nurses stood silently near the walls. Everyone was witnessing this moment. Daniel stepped closer. "Mom, please, let's talk privately." I shook my head gently. "No." His eyes widened. "This conversation doesn't need to be private." Rebecca suddenly spoke again. "Please, Mrs. Whitmore, we can fix this." I looked directly at her. "Fix what?" She hesitated. "The misunderstanding?" I smiled faintly. "Oh, there's no misunderstanding." Daniel's breathing became heavier. "Mom, please, we're going to lose the house." The words hung in the air. Lose the house. For a moment, I remembered the day we moved into that house. Daniel was 6 years old. He ran from room to room shouting with excitement, "This is my room! This is my room!" Back then, it wasn't a big house, just 2 bedrooms and a small kitchen. But to us, it felt like a palace. I worked for 10 years to save enough money to buy it. 10 years of double shifts. 10 years of exhaustion. 10 years of sacrifice. And now, my son stood in front of me worried about losing it. Not because of memories, not because it was home, but because it was his property. Or at least, he thought it was. Daniel took another step forward. "Mom, please, I made a mistake." His voice broke again. A huge mistake. For the first time, tears appeared in his eyes. "I shouldn't have sent you here." Rebecca nodded quickly beside him. "Yes, it was the wrong decision." I studied their faces carefully. The fear was real. The regret may be real too. But something inside me remained calm, steady, because I had already made my decision. Daniel suddenly dropped the letter onto the table. "Mom, I'll fix everything." "How?" I asked quietly. "I'll bring you home," he said quickly. "You can stay in your room back. I'll hire a caretaker if you need help. You don't have to stay here." The words echoed through the room, but they felt empty. Too late. I asked him one simple question. "Daniel, when you drove away last week, did you look back?" He froze. The memory was clear in both our minds. The glass doors of the nursing home, my small suitcase, his car disappearing down the road. "No," he whispered. "I didn't." "I know." I nodded slowly. Silence filled the room again. Then I said something very quietly. "But I did." Daniel looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I stood by that window for almost an hour after you left." His shoulders slumped. "Mom, but you didn't." The words were soft, not angry, just honest. Daniel wiped his eyes quickly. "I'm here now." "Yes," I said gently. "You are." Rebecca suddenly stepped forward. "Mrs. Whitmore, please understand. We were just trying to do what was best." "For who?" I asked calmly. She didn't answer, because the truth was obvious. It was never about what was best for me. It was about convenience, about comfort, about not wanting the responsibility. Daniel suddenly fell to his knees, right there in the middle of the dining hall. The entire room gasped. "Mom, I'm sorry." His voice shook with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I was selfish. I was stupid. I thought about money, about work, about my own life, but I forgot the most important thing. You are my mother." He looked up at me, tears running down his face. For a long moment, I simply stared at him, the same boy who once scraped his knee and cried in my arms, now kneeling like a child again, begging. Nurse Anna wiped a tear from her eye. Even Mr. Harris looked emotional. Daniel continued speaking desperately. "Mom, please forgive me. I'll do anything. Just don't take the house." Rebecca nodded quickly. "Yes, please." But I raised my hand gently. "Daniel." He stopped speaking immediately. "Yes, Mom?" I took a deep breath. "You still don't understand." His expression became confused. "What do you mean?" "This was never about the house." He blinked. "Then what is it about?" I looked around the room again, at the quiet residents sitting at their tables, at the loneliness in their eyes. Then I turned back to my son. "It's about respect." The words were simple, but powerful. "Daniel, when you were a child, I carried you in my arms. When you were sick, I stayed awake all night beside your bed. When you were struggling in school, I worked 3 jobs to pay for tutors. I gave you everything I had." My voice remained calm. "But when I became old, you gave me a suitcase." Daniel lowered his head again. Tears fell onto the floor. "I know," he whispered, "and I will regret that for the rest of my life." I stepped closer to him, and for a moment I placed my hand gently on his shoulder. "I forgive you." His head snapped up in shock. "You do?" "Yes." Relief flooded his face again. But before he could speak again, I continued. "Forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to the way they were." His expression changed. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not coming back." The room went silent again. Daniel's face turned pale. You're staying here? I nodded. Yes. Rebecca looked shocked. But why? I smiled softly. Because this place needs me more than that house ever did. I turned toward Mr. Lawson, who was still standing nearby. Is the purchase ready? He nodded respectfully. Yes, Mrs. Widmore. Daniel looked confused. Purchase? I turned back to him. I told you earlier. I'm buying this nursing home. Gasps filled the room. Daniel stared at me in disbelief. You're serious? Very. Mr. Lawson opened his briefcase and handed me a document. The contract is ready for your signature. I picked up the pen. Then I looked around the room one last time, at the residents, at the nurses, at the place where so many people had been left behind, and I said something that would stay with everyone forever. No mother, no father, no human being should ever feel like a burden. Then I signed the paper. The nurses started clapping first, then the residents joined. Soon the entire dining hall was filled with applause. Daniel remained kneeling on the floor, watching me. Mom, his voice was quiet now. I understand. I walked over and helped him stand up. You made a mistake, I said gently. But mistakes can teach us something. He nodded slowly. What should I do now? I looked him directly in the eyes. Go home. But the house. I smiled faintly. You can stay there. His eyes widened. You're not evicting us? No. Relief flooded his face again. But there's one condition. Anything, he said quickly. You visit. He blinked. Visit? Yes. Not once a year, not on holidays. Visit the people here. Talk to them. Listen to their stories. Remember that one day you might be in their place. Daniel nodded slowly.